Yeah. So, is Libra putting monetary control in the hands of big tech, or is it actually enabling 1.7 million unbanked to join the global economy? Only 2 weeks ago, Facebook, together with a large and well-respected group of partners such as Uber, Visa, Spotify, announced Libra. It was announced as a simple global currency and financial infrastructure that empowers billions of people, reinvent money, transform the global economy so people everywhere can live better lives. In the days after, everyone was talking about it on social media, on conferences, and here at Factory as well. But surprisingly, everyone had very different opinions. Is it good for adoption of cryptocurrencies, or is it actually bad for democracy? In other words, is it good, bad, or ugly? And the regulators seem to be confused as well, if not worried or scared, actually. So yesterday, if you're not aware, the Committee on Financial Services of the House of Representatives of the United States requested Facebook to halt developments on Libra and Calibra because it appears that these products may lend themselves to an entirely new global financial system that is based out of Switzerland and intended to rival the US monetary policy and the dollar. Rival the US monetary policy and the dollar? So good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. My name is Silvan, and as president of BerChain, it's my pleasure to be your host for the evening. Please note that this event is live streamed on YouTube, and please use BerChain, hashtag BerChain on social media as a hashtag. We will be taking questions through Slido and more about that later, but if you go to sli.do on your mobile device and use BerChain as a keyword, you can ask questions throughout the panels. So before we move on to the two exciting panels that we have with amazing speakers we have lined up for you, I'd like to thank T-Labs, John over here, for buying us the first beers, a whole fridge full of it. Perhaps a little bit of an applause for John. So John is also going to be on the first panel, already set in the right position, ready to go. But the other thing that I'd like to do is also thank Factory for their support and making the space available over here. And perhaps I can invite Arnim, the CEO of Factory, on stage for a few words of welcome from Factory.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. It's COO, not CEO.
CEO. If I talk too fast when I'm on stage.
All right, I don't want to steal much of your time. Welcome, everyone, at Factory Berlin. Just as you guys, we believe that blockchain is a very huge topic, and it's a huge opportunity for the Berlin startup ecosystem. And if it's such a huge opportunity, we have to be organized as a community, and that's what actually BerChain does. And therefore, we have decided to become a member of BerChain, and are very happy to have been taken on board and to be able to support this with, for example, providing space. Yeah, I hope that this is the first of many more events happening, because I don't know who else is in here a Factory member. Maybe a hand of not so many. Well,
I'm a Factory member.
Maybe we can convert some of you through those events. But it is obviously a very relevant topic as well to our community, and therefore we're looking forward to hosting more of these events. Let's see what comes across. And now, enjoy an evening with probably the hottest topic in crypto and blockchain at the moment. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you so much,
and have a good evening.
So BerChain started in 2017 as a Slack channel for the Berlin blockchain community, but meanwhile it's grown to something that I could not have imagined back then. To explain a little bit more about it, I'd like to invite Ricardo Garcia, the head of blockchain advisory at Scantrust and the vice president of BerChain, on stage to give you a very quick rundown on this.
All right, thanks for the intro, Silvan. So I, again, also don't want to steal too much of your time, but since we have such a great big audience today, I want to use this opportunity to also tell you a little bit about what we do at BerChain and what it's all about. So put very simply, we have framed the mission of BerChain Connect and promote the Berlin blockchain community inside and outside the blockchain ecosystem to promote and position Berlin as the global blockchain capital. that's a big mission statement we have put out there. And you see there's 3 pillars. So we want to connect the community. We want to connect the community with other stakeholders. And we want to promote Berlin as a blockchain hub. So as of today, we see ourselves as this neutral body here in Berlin, which connects all these different stakeholders and keeps them together, because we believe Berlin is a really, really great blockchain community, and it deserves to be shown and promoted to the world. So we have a broad base of backers. So as of today, we have 17 organizational members that you see here. Some of them are here in person among us, and you can meet them afterwards. This is the first time we communicate them in public. So we had our inauguration event this week, and there will be a press release to communicate these new members that have joined us on this journey to promote Berlin. So the way we are organized and what we do can be structured into four pillars. So we organize networking events similar to what we are doing today around specific topics. We organize smaller workshops and roundtables, which are more exclusive rounds for our members. We organize working groups around specific topics, and we offer different types of services around the Berlin blockchain ecosystem. For example, we're working on a Berlin Get Started guide and on an ecosystem guide to display the companies that are here. So if you're interested, there's 3 ways how you can get involved. That's my call to action. You can join us for our monthly block beers at R&D Cafe right now, which is an informal gathering of people coming together that just want to explore the Berlin blockchain space. You can join our Slack channel on our webpage, and you can become an association member for this. Just reach out on board@berchain.com if you want to become an organizational member with your company. Some examples of things we have done. This was our inauguration event with the members that we have, where we discussed our activities. Some people here in the room were there, and you might recognize them. Then we organized a really big event at the beginning of the year with, where we connected Berlin blockchain CEOs with politics. So we had the state, the Ministry of the Kingdom of Interior Relations State Secretary coming over from the Netherlands to speak, and we had Sabine Smentek from Berlin speaking. And this was the first occasion where we connected politicians with blockchain stakeholders. And similar to that, we've been running other events. So we also sent a team to 2 teams, one to the hackathon at Odyssey, which had a great success, and won. Another team to the Swiss blockchain hackathon in Berlin, who also promoted BerChain in a great way. And these are some of the example activities that we conduct. So reach out if you want to get in touch. I'll be here the whole evening. Thanks, and enjoy the evening.
So perhaps a quick show of hands. Who knows what Libra is? Who knows how it works? Okay, and this is exactly the reason why we invited Balázs from Eternity Consulting to tell you a little bit more in a quick 10-minute rundown about what it is and what we will be talking about today. You can stay here, that's fine. Yeah, so sure. Please, a warm applause for Balázs.
Hello, everyone. So I'm gonna do why you all came here to talk about Libra, and I got like 15 minutes, so I'm gonna be pretty quick. In general, I'm gonna try to cover as many topics about Libra as possible, because we're gonna have 2 great panels that will deep dive into this. So actually, Facebook has been already in the financial space with a project that got shut down, which was a very centralized system, an e-money, a token system on Facebook, and that's something that's very interesting, because this is not their first attempt, and they definitely learned about it. What changed is another 1.5 billion users and a lot of money in the bank. So what is Libra? Is it a concept? Is it already a technology? Can we use it? And what are the myths that has been around on the internet for the last 2 weeks about what it can do, what it will do, and where is it at the moment? So is it a decentralized open source blockchain, which the white paper states? So a blockchain, as many of you know, is a series of transactions hashed into a chain, while Libra is a Merkle tree-based system, so it can't be called blockchain. But it is decentralized up to a certain degree, because it's a permission system as of now, It hopes to become a permissionless open system like Bitcoin and Ethereum, but currently there is those 27 companies that are basically gonna be deciding on transactions happening or not because they have the power. It does have a smart contract platform. It's called Move. I think we're gonna talk a little bit about in our panel. It is a very interesting technology. Some people says on the internet that this might be more interesting than the Libra currency itself. If some of you are familiar with WeChat, we can imagine a space where Facebook puts out an open system that can be developed on more openly what WeChat API architecture enables. If you don't know what's WeChat, search it. It's the Chinese 900 million user-based everything app. Basically, you do everything through that. And then let's go next. So we are talking about a low volatility currency. It's not similar to any other major unknown pegged currencies because it doesn't peg to a given currency. It's not a dollar-based, so it follows the value of dollar. It's not any other. It's not pegged to decentralized currencies such as DAI. It pegged to a basket of currencies and low-yield government bonds. It will be pegged, of course. This way. Now, the question is that, is it Libra above these currencies then? Because there is 27 companies that might become 100 who can decide on the value of Libra. They can change their arrangement. They can buy immense amount of currency if there are enough users, which can change the actual value of these currencies. And of course, these are very big countries, but they didn't state it if only these 4 currencies. And if they start to buy smaller countries' currencies, they can change that as well. So we shall see if there is one above all. About the stablecoin, so this is just an index of the 4 currency compared to gold. And basically, since they have the ability to mint new money and manage it in ways that governments might don't have, because they also have actual citizens and not just bottom lines, it could become a much more stable currency, but it can become a currency which is managed by 30 companies. So what did Libra brought by today? It's definitely brought, in some parts, a big hike in Bitcoin's price, because we all know that Facebook got insane amount of free advertisement through this announcement. Yes, they have a lot of money, but they got a lot of advertisement, and hence cryptocurrencies and mostly the most known Bitcoin also got a lot of advertisement. Facebook shares didn't really went up, Bitcoin price did. So that's also happened. And yes, it's one of the hottest topics at the moment, besides the raise and the recent slump in the prices. What else Libra has? It has Calibra. It's the Facebook subsidiary company that is going to partake among the 27 companies in the Libra Foundation or Association, which has designers. It's a big thing in crypto because we tend not to hire designers because things work on code. We can expect an amazing user experience, which is embedded in Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, in ways we shall see. Calibra will be beautiful. Now, on the other hand, as this is not a packed currency, it will be complicated. It will have a process to buy it, which I talk about a little later. But from a user experience perspective, if it's not $1 pegged, if it's $1.1 in value, every time you would transact, you would need to have in mind what is the transaction value if one currency drops where you are living, for example, the pound after October. Then maybe having Libra is better, but the prices might change. So from a user experience, that's going to be complicated, and we might go back where Bitcoin is, that everything is always shown in dollar. Because that's the global currency at the moment, not Libra yet. About the companies, so there is a lot of different kind. You can read about this. They are over-advertised. The interesting part is that not every company put out PR announcement that they joined the Libra Foundation, which is a sign that maybe FOMO. Also, some of the companies are in a similar space of payments, so they might be more interested to be present and understand how it would work. $10 million from their budget is usually nothing. But being there when the governance is created could be beneficial for them, or they can better understand, prepare for a change if it might happen. And it might happen. So I don't know who recognized this logo. This logo is a company's logo which used to be 7 times bigger in valuation than Apple. This company was supposed to be $7.2 trillion in valuation. It's the East India Dutch trading company, which had its own army, which had its own rights for trade. It created trade deals with different governments, and it was beyond most governments at the time. Can this foundation become something which is above governments because it has a non-financial bank-regulated currency? We shall see. But this is something to have in mind, that once you go beyond governments, things change. As we all know, when you are rich, the rules bend. So I also made a little version of like the other side, which is coming out. Different regulators and government organizations that signal their interest in the currency because they were not invited to mine. Many of these organizations have more power than Facebook. They don't have the budget, but they definitely are able to limit the operations of any of those companies that are part of the Libra Foundation. So while it can be above the regulations, these organizations and their relatives are definitely powerful enough to make it harder to launch. They have a very engaging social network because they actually just replied to me 2 days ago. And I was very happy to read it. But I also read the Calibra white paper, which says that it will require KYC and AML. So while they are stating on their website and every PR message that they're going to bank the 1.7 billion people that are missing from the banking system, most of those people are missing from the banking system because they don't have an identity, or they are too poor to access banking system, or there is just no connectivity where they are living. And as Facebook, a digital system, or Libra, sorry, we are still very far from make it offline. Yes, it could be turned into text messages and all these nice things. It's not the solution, but they actually never said that those 1 billion users that they expect to have are the 1.7 unbanked, but that's just PR. And then sort of one of the very interesting aspects that I've been actually working on is identity. So Libra white paper talks a little bit about identity. Calibra definitely talks about KYC, anti-money laundering, and these aspects. But it's very vague in general. There is a lot of assumptions. Calibra will be a regulated entity, but what does this decentralized identity means in a Libra framework? If it rolls out for 2.2 billion active users on Facebook, plus WhatsApp users, plus Instagram users, it's going to be big by start. Does it require for everyone KYC, like know your customer, like identity verification? How data will be passing through from anti-money laundering processes that you use Facebook, and Facebook knows you better than your government or your mother. They claim in their papers that there will be no data sharing, but it's a bit hard to believe. It's a really big question because, of course, if it's implemented well, it could be very amazing. If it's implemented badly, it can be very dangerous from a privacy perspective. Do people care more and more? Do people in their targeted countries care? They don't know about privacy. Like most people didn't know about until Cambridge Analytica that privacy is a thing and you don't have it anymore. Just a few like interesting aspects that I picked out from the white paper. So they are not sharing without a consent, which we all know how easy to share your contacts on an iPhone. Share, done, they have all your contacts. We shall see how simple and user-friendly they made these functions. we can expect that it will be very easy. And naturally, Calibra is a regulated entity. Regulated entities must provide information to regulators. Therefore, other entities that are involved, and since Calibra is a direct subsidy of Facebook, so 100% owned, it will be related to Facebook, all those data, so they must share it as well. So this question of like, we're not gonna use that data, how? So if anyone is interested, there are the links to all the available information about Libra. You can reach me or tag me at Nembol, and you can write me an email at balazs@aeternityconsulting.com. It's a strategy consulting company. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Balázs, for the great introduction to Libra. So I'm sure everyone is excited to get into the discussions. The main issues on Libra we've seen in the socio-economic side and on the technical side, and we have two panels today. The first one is around the socio-economic sides of Libra. And I'd like to remind you that you can ask questions during the whole panel, which will be addressed by the moderator at the end of the panel. And this is also accessible through the internet for those who are watching on the live stream. And then those questions will be addressed as well. Anyway, let me start with introducing the panel to you. The first one is Julian Leitloff. Julian founded his first company at age 22 and has been an entrepreneur since. He's the co-founder and CEO at Fractal, compliance onboarding for the Web 3.0 with a focus on user experience and reusability. For his previous company, Julian was named amongst the Forbes 30 under 30 in 2016. Julian worked at Deutsche Bank and is a Zeppelin University graduate. At Fractal, Julian is working to create one login for global compliance. Please give a warm applause for Julian Leitloff. The second one, who is not sitting here yet, I'm getting to you guys soon, is Christoph Brück with Next Big Thing, the CFO and member of the board of Next Big Thing AG. Christoph Brück started his career as a corporate lawyer specialized in M&A, venture capital, and financing. He has previously co-founded the Naga Group AG and served the company as executive director, which included the responsibility for its IPO in 2016. He co-founded the Beta Indexes, was the CEO of Swidex GmbH, and is an active business angel and seed investor in various companies. And the Next Big Thing is a member of BerChain. Warm applause for Christoph Brück. With an extensive background in digital strategy and innovation, Dr. Marvin G Maestri provides the vision for Confidio Blockchain Venture Studio and its role in building and accelerating decentralized enterprise solutions. Mervyn has held numerous key positions at prestigious organizations, including the CEO at Deutsche Bank and global managing partner at Accenture. Please, a warm applause for Dr. Marvin G Maestri. Markus F Franke heads Celo's European operations and works on protocol economics and stability. Markus is an economist. Prior to joining Celo, he worked as multi-asset portfolio manager and investment advisor at Allianz Global Investors. Before that, he started his career in the financial industry at Merrill Lynch International and JP Morgan Securities. He earned his PhD in quantitative finance from Ludwig Maximilians Universität München and Columbia University. Markus, perhaps you want to stand up for a second. Warm applause for Markus. And John Clement is Senior Vice President at Deutsche Telekom AG and heads the Telekom Innovation Laboratories, T-Labs in Berlin. John co-founded and leads all product development for T-Labs Blockchain Group, a team dedicated to decentralization research and development. Deutsche Telekom is a member of BerChain, and the drinks tonight are on John. Thank you, John. Balázs, you're on the next panel. Can we free up the chair for the moderator? So, oh yeah. You can always join. Oh, everyone can always join. Anyway, your moderator, with a background in economics and business administration, Clem first held an analyst and business development position at Braintree before falling in love with blockchain. Clem previously worked for the data trading platform Weave as a crypto economics researcher before joining Next Big Thing AG as blockchain analyst in 2018, where he now drives the development of blockchain-based business model. And Next Big Thing, again, is a member of BerChain.
Right, so loads of stuff, loads of questions going on here. To give you a short idea on how I'm going to structure the thing, I'm going to ask sort of individually tailored questions to our panel, but also open questions to these guys, and hopefully each one of them will have a take on these questions. But first, I'd like to start with a question for you, John, coming from T-Labs. So, as you know, and you're well aware of, Iliad and Vodafone are founding members of the Libra Association. That question is obvious. Can you tell us if Deutsche Telekom has been approached by the Libra Association to become a validator node? And if not, are they considering to apply?
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that. First, though, thanks to Ricardo and Silvan for organizing this and getting BerChain together. I'd like to give them a round of applause. We've been 2 years going to meetings like this for blockchain here in Berlin, and this is a fantastic audience, at least the biggest one I've seen, so well done, guys. Yes, we were asked to participate in Libra, and since I lead blockchain strategy for this company, it landed on my desk. So I was engaged in conversations with the Facebook team. I'm going to try hard not to say anything I shouldn't tonight, but maybe if you ask the right question, I'll maybe let out more than I should, but we certainly evaluated it. I actually wrote a 2-page paper response to the board of management of the company on my own feelings of what we should do. So on a personal note, I said, oh, this is amazing. As an entrepreneur, of course we should participate in this. Why wouldn't we sit on the sideline of this experiment? I don't know if it's going to be successful. In fact, I might bet against it, and I can tell you why over the course of this panel, but I'm glad that we were asked, and I'm glad that we got to participate in the process to see Facebook trying to convince the world to be trusted getting into currencies, getting into monetary policy. So I don't know if that answered all your questions.
It does. That's breaking news. Thank you for the insight. Then second, in regards to this, is part of your responsibilities at T-Labs is to lead the blockchain research and development teams. How do you approach staffing and research with regards to Libra and its Move programming language? And is there any sort of advice you'd give to people who consider pivoting to the Move programming language and maybe larger organization and their approach on how to deal with this? Because they're rolling out their product in 2020.
So first, I'll admit I never heard of Move until I saw it on the screen tonight. I assume most big companies are coming up with their own languages. It seems to be like something everybody does. It's a great strategy, by the way, because you're training people to start working on your technologies. I mean, a great example of that, by the way, is there was a whole bunch of people who understood Objective-C programming language, but didn't have a lot of work. And then one day the iPhone came along and suddenly that was needed. So I don't know, from my point of view, I wouldn't try to convince anybody to go to Move or Go or stick with JavaScript. And the last language I spent a lot of time on was ActionScript for Flash, and that didn't take me too far, you know. I would say just keep your options open, you know, and be willing to take a chance on that. It's too early to say if we're going to staff up on this. I don't know how much availability there's going to be for anybody to program themselves into this network or not, or if Facebook and Calibra or not are just going to give things to people to use. So that remains to be seen.
Okay, all right, cool. Thanks for the answer. Now I'm going to ask an open question to all of you guys. Oh yeah, by the way, yeah, don't hesitate to say if you need the mic, I'll just pass it on. So yesterday, there's been a note from the United States House of Representatives Committee on Financial Services that was sent to Facebook, asking them to stop immediately their operations and their allocation of resources towards the Libra Association. The direct question it's linked to that is, do you consider the biggest threat to be regulatory for the Libra Association? And could central banks shut down the project, fearing a loss of power or control over Libra? It's a big question, but it's a good question because, things are going to change, I guess.
Just remember, this is the same body of people who have asked for Donald Trump's tax returns, and he refuses to give it to them. I don't know if you know about the House of Representatives, but they have some authority, but they can also be completely ignored.
Yeah.
Just as an asterisk to the question.
All right.
I don't think it's regulation. I think just governments could squash this if they wanted to, probably.
So I actually think that the white papers that the Facebook guys have published have left a lot of questions open, and most of them were actually regulatory in nature. So they want to have those bonds, but they don't go into depths how they want to regulate it, how they want to publish them, issue them. They have no bank right now in their consortium that I'm aware of that has the authority to do so. So they might need a partner, or they might take another road, an alternative road. So all of these kind of things are at least roadblocks which they will have to discuss with regulatory. Also, I see, of course, that the regulatory bodies are a bit concerned about not only about the loss of power, but also about potential of money laundering. We all know that Bitcoin and Silk Road had a very close relationship. They are, I think, afraid of something like this. So Libra has rightfully stated that they will fight this, that they will actually be aggressive on this concerning the KYC and the anti-money laundering rules. But considering that they haven't gone into detail, they haven't shown the system, they haven't shown the technology to provide the security, I actually understand that there are some concerns from regulatory bodies. Actually, every cryptocurrency has faced them that has come out over the years. And actually most alternative banking solutions like PayPal have too, so it's not a surprise.
Right.
I mean, I think that the question is not the risk. I think the important question to ask is what role regulatory bodies have to play, not just in the US, but I think across the world. Because if you look through the Facebook or the Libra white paper, it is packed with marketing terms. Marketing terms to basically written by very professional PR and marketing people to give people the impression that this is going to help them somehow. And I think right at the beginning, I think we need to say very clearly that Libra is neither a blockchain nor is it decentralized. Yeah? In fact, it's a highly centralized group of people and about 27 people, 27 bodies. These 27 bodies are predominantly based out of the US. Their combined market cap is $2 trillion. Yeah? So to call this group of titans decentralized is actually stretching the definition of decentralized quite a bit. So I think from my point of view, regulation, governments, people who actually were voted in to protect consumers, I think this is part of just doing their job. I mean, we can talk about it a little bit later.
Is there responsibility to shut it down? Is this what you imply?
It's a responsibility to, I mean, you go to Cambridge, so Facebook as a company, based on their history with Cambridge Analytica, based on their history of using people's private data without their knowledge, I would say one should be very skeptical of Facebook and what they're doing. The second thing is it's virtually impossible, I think, to have a company who is 100% owner of a wallet and that control and has access to the data of roughly a third of the world's population. I don't know how many of you have watched Mr. Robot. Yeah?
Can raise your hand.
It looks like Facebook actually looked at what Evil Corp was about and decided to copy it. And that's my view. Yeah?
And I really like to add here, so one thing is that especially the wallet, the Calibra wallet, is not even owned by that really not decentralized group of corporations, it's 100% owned by Facebook, and Facebook will have access to the keys and access basically to all payment data. And even more, part of that system is also a large reserve, and this reserve is really, really critical because the Libra currency, as we heard in the introduction, is not pegged to a fiat currency, but pegged to this reserve. And basically, this group of people can decide what will be in this reserve, what, like government bonds, corporate bonds, even maybe higher risk securities could be in there. Who will manage this reserve? Who will manage duration risk? Who will manage interest rate risk? This is all not in this more marketing language type of paper we currently have and the information we currently have on Libra. And this probably also will determine a large part of regulation around that.
The paper suggests that it will be managed by the Libra Association Council, but I need to, I need to stick to our timing. So, actually, Markus, I have a question for you regarding Celo. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Celo, yes.
Celo, whose mission is to build the infrastructure to serve those excluded from the current financial system. So from the very beginning, you've been focused on financial inclusion across the world. My first question to you is, how do you think that Libra differs to your project, from your project, and yeah?
So first of all, for us, it's very nice that now terms like financial inclusion and cryptocurrency are becoming more mainstream words. So it's probably also some good in that Facebook has a large audience. Yeah. And the Celo platform, which is a very decentralized owned blockchain, has a lot of differences to the Libra thing. And we heard about Libra in our introduction, and maybe I want to probably stress four parts of it. So one is actually the wallet, which is a custodial wallet, and Facebook owns keys in that wallet. We want to have a decentralized system, and therefore we tie in our blockchain phone numbers to public keys, and basically when you know the phone number of anybody, it's very easy to send and receive payment across the world. A second thing is the Libra blockchain, as we have heard, is for now at least a permissioned blockchain, or permissioned something which uses also a PBFT type of consensus. But the consensus will be like within a closed club. We design an open platform.
Delegated PBFT also.
True. So we also use hot stuff PBFT, but we design an own blockchain, and this is open, permissionless, proof of stake type of blockchain. So basically everybody can take part, and you don't have to be part of a club. We also do a lot of research on how to scale these type of consensus mechanisms. The third thing we also heard in the introduction is privacy, and this is for sure not on the roadmap of Facebook. We actually at Celo like the Zcash type of privacy, so one of the inventors and founders of Zcash also now works on that Celo platform, and we certainly have privacy on the roadmap as it's becoming more and more important. And maybe the fourth thing is the currency itself. So the currency is pegged to a basket of something. This is basically, so we know for sure there will be some currency risk if you have to convert to your local fiat currency, or if you're a business and you have to do accounting in your local currency. And more decentralized projects like, for example, Makerdai or Celo, they peg to local fiat currencies and actually want to live alongside fiat. And this is probably differences, or some of the differences of the two systems.
Right. Well, thanks for the answer. It is mentioned in the white paper that the Libra Association will allocate grants to many projects that have social impacts. As you see the two products that are WhatsApp and Messenger, what sort of applications do you think will be sort of built on top and will be eligible for these grants?
So if I again start on that, is I think one thing, and we saw this also in the introduction, probably another wallet which is not owned by Facebook. So this would be something Facebook could foster this or try to prevent this in terms of privacy. And basically all, in our space we would call it decentralized finance applications, but this is more like centralized finance applications where you enable banking services like lending and borrowing, also maybe hedging to the volatility, however high or low that will be of the Libra currency. Could be applications, also just exchanges from Libra to fiat could be one thing which will be developed. And basically all other finance applications like marginalized trading, all this could be developed on top.
Okay, right. So the two of you have mentioned that to you the assets that would be backing the Libra reserve are a problem. So my question for you is, and for all of you, and I'm super looking forward to know what's your take on that. But if banks and governments prevent the Libra association from buying bonds and deposits, what other assets could the association use for a liquid and stable reserve? Because in the end, it's very much a game of liquidity in regards to the reserve and how they can maintain that liquidity and that volume. So does anyone have a take on that?
I do. I think overall the whole thing is about incentives, and you have to get millions of people to change their habits. What incentives are you going to give them to do so? So they come out of the gate saying they want to get involved in financial inclusion. What do the people at Facebook know about financial inclusion? It's a massive problem. You have a couple billion people who are not banked. They're not the first people to think of, getting involved and changing the habits of people who have very little money. You know quite a bit about it. I've spent some time working in Africa and trying to bring technical solutions to the unbanked. But if you have $1 a week, are you even going to take the time to digitize it? You get your $1, you immediately go get food or whatever you need for your family. In fact, I think what the Gates Foundation finds is even giving a cow to somebody is far more valuable than any amount of money. Because what do they immediately do with the money? They're not really sure. So to come out of the gates and saying they're getting into financial inclusion, you first start with changing people's habits. So you're going to have a group of people first understand what a wallet means to them. Then you're going to try to teach them that this is a whole new currency they've never heard of. And so there's a whole education that goes on with people who would spend it. But how do they earn it? Well, you're going to have people send it to them from wealthy countries. Well, that whole paradigm exists already. So I think they're going to have difficulty getting uptake on the initial use cases they're talking about. And that's the first thing I have a red flag to, is this system going to take off? Because it's a lot of habits and it's a lot of incentives to go through. But getting back to
the question,
who's going to give them money, I'm setting up for this, but money will come if the people with money are incentivized to put it in, right? If there's a return on their investment. And I think you can go all around the world and find different pools of money to put into this if the people who have the money are incentivized to do so.
Right?
Yes, I think one of the interesting questions in this one is what actually happens with the money when people buy a Libra. I mean, let's say a Libra is in the beginning $1, so they get $1. What is the Libra Foundation doing with it? I mean, do they spend all the money paid for Libra in bonds? Is basically the money spent on buying Libra the underlying? Do they have an overhead? Do they say they spent like 50%, 25%? And basically, if they don't get bonds, if they don't get issued, if they don't find banks to help them with it, they could just have a bank account, put all the money in and say that's the underlying. But that would mean the foundation needs to rely on charity to exist. And I kind of personally have my doubts that a huge commercial company has built something that will in the end rely on its own charity. So I think the Libra is basically made to make money, not to spend money on it. And so that's one of the questions. If this bonding system fails, how they actually achieve the right volume. Because volume is a problem. We're talking about them attacking currencies. There are $80 trillion in brought money out there. If you have a few hundred billion, that makes nothing to that. That changes nothing to that. So basically, that's one of the questions they have to solve, which they have not so far answered, if this should really have an impact and not be an internal payment solution for Facebook.
I think the one area that the Libra white paper is actually quite detailed on, what's interesting for me was the issue about the reserves. And for me, that brings into question a key governance issue, because you've got these key validators, the 2 trillion guys I spoke about. They have the sole discretion under the governance of, at the moment, to decide what reserves to buy and what reserves to sell. The other thing about it is that the reserves are then held to match the amount of Libra. So that, at least on the face of it, seems quite good. But I think in their Facebook, or this entire group gives away the main reason for Libra. In all of these large companies, one of the key things that is not inconsequential for them is the cost of working capital. And so if they have this, they actually have a very cheap source of working capital right at the beginning. So the business model for them, at least at the beginning, is quite clear. Then the business model later is about how to mine the data. And for me, it's a red flag, because I have got a group of people who are basically controlled by shareholders, who are basically deciding how a currency used by roughly 2.4 billion people is being controlled and managed. And for me, that's a massive red flag.
To be fair, we need to take into account what are the alternatives. And I'm not sure if Tether is so much better, actually, when we look at the reserves. And I think one of the reasons, and also the problem for governments shutting it down, is that the reasons for existing and not being able to shut it down are the same. Because we need that. And I think that this strikes a nerve, because we weren't actually able to invent something that has such an impact. Because, I mean, we are living in a globalized world, and we have this national bullshit everywhere, like in terms of identification, in terms of money. It's just making it really hard. And then something like Libra comes along and suddenly threatens that. And that just set off a whole chain of like people, you know, jumping in, requesting it to stop, having strong opinions. And I actually think that's the most interesting experiment that we've seen. And it's actually a catalyst for innovation in a place where we haven't seen much innovation since 1945, which is governments and the social fabric. So how do we want to build governance around things like that? How are we going to make sure that it's not this exclusive club, but a democratic elected body, for example, making sure that not only the members are being served, but the people using it, for example. And it could be a movie straight out of like a villain straight out of a movie, or it actually could be another movie where it kind of like facilitates change that's due for, I don't know. For me, as a big surprise, this came from a point where I least expected it, from the German Conservative Party. And my friends know I'm not too fond of their politics sometimes, but what the CDU published with the digital euro was actually quite amazing. And that would kill the whole Libra project in Europe right away.
Yes, I mean, should we blame governments for not having done that in the first place? Yeah.
I think governments are completely, they have not been doing their job for the last, I don't know how many number of years. If you look at the...
Yes, you can clap if you feel like relieved afterwards.
And just the point you made about the fact that the banking system, the financial system has not seen any innovation since 1945. I think that's something I must disagree with very strongly.
The government, not the banking system.
No, even the government. Because the government, remember the government...
Please do not disagree for too long.
Yeah. The governments don't write the laws, but the governments let the lobbyists write the laws for them. And there's been an immense amount of financial innovation in that area. Where I agree with you completely is I think what Libra does bring about is a number of civil organizations can now start thinking, well, how do we put a concept like this in place without the idea of a large number of private shareholders controlling it. And you're right. I think that if you look online, that discussion has actually already started. Yeah.
Right.
And it's not for nothing that Facebook has put the women's bank right at the front, even though the women's bank is, you'll see a lot of African women on the women's bank. It's headquartered in New York, and they're actually very minor players in the 27 in this consortium. So for me, it's also a point of cynical marketing, but it does raise the point, can the blockchain community, because we mustn't forget where the blockchain started. It was about how to reform and the financial system and make the world better. And can we actually do that in a parallel action? Yes.
So why do we even need a new coin? Why can't Facebook just integrate Bitcoin into all of its chats, right? Which brings me back to your point about these 27 companies worth $2 trillion, and I hate to say the word incentive again, but what's their incentive to get involved? It's to make money, right? So your two statements ago, I'm totally aligned with you, and that's the next red flag for me, right?
Yeah, but because of network congestion, simply because of scalability, we're talking about 2.7 billion users, which leads me to another question. In that case, does scalability...
They're not going to build a network that's fundamentally better than Bitcoin, right?
Does scalability...
It's been worked on for 10 years by hundreds of developers.
Does scalability justify centralization? That's my question for you. Are we better off moving from a centralized network to a permissionless network, or should we start straight from the beginning with a very horizontal governance and very heavy processes to change these protocols that many of our developer community today rely on, and see the progress being so slow? Many people are pretty disappointed by the progress that's been made by the Ethereum community, for instance, when it comes to scalability. They've mentioned in their roadmap that they plan on rolling out a fully permissionless system within the next 5 years, and maybe the key to success here is actually to move from a centralized system that can first guarantee a user base, so that it's appealing for developers and researchers to look into scalability solutions, to then second, make it permissionless. So far, to my knowledge, Bitcoin and Ethereum are not scalable products that are ready for production for 2.7 billion people.
Probably we will also touch that in the technical panel afterwards, but I think like the technology for that is actually out there. For example, the research we also did on scaling proof-of-stake networks and scale there on the governance side with BF trees and other things. But what we here have is like parts of that network are designed so that it's not like, the purpose is not really that it will be decentralized at some point in time. So it will always be a managed, centralized reserve. You will always have an asset manager who has to, even if they buy a basket of government bonds, who has to roll over the basket, who has to manage duration risk, who also has basically to manage interest rate risks if we're going into a rising rate environment and all these things. So for example, the reserve is one part of the system which is not built for decentralizing it, and also the Calibra wallet is probably also not built like for true decentralization. Otherwise you wouldn't like personally hold all keys as Facebook 100%.
I think it comes down to the question what you actually want from this. I mean, to put it provocative, it's like you have on the one side people who want a cryptocurrency which is owned by the people, decentralized, so it's not governed, it's not influenced by governments, not influenced by big corporations. Your data is safe and protected, or at least to the same amount available to everyone, so there's no one to take advantage of it. And the other idea is that you actually have a very cool technology, very advanced bank. Which is it basically, if you have you're bringing on your own currency and then you're doing everything that banks do, getting out loans, making financing, getting fees, all these kind of things. So, and the question is, can we actually move from being this cool bank to something that is more just? Then the counter question is, why don't we try to start with doing something without these inherent flaws? Just because of scalability, then let's just wait for a few more generations of cryptocurrencies to solve this, instead of turning to players which have invested interest in what actually happens to this currency.
there is also zero indication that this technology is capable of being scalable for 2.45 billion people. If you look at the white paper, I actually discussed it with my architects this morning, and they say there's nothing in here that indicates that anything of this technology will become scalable now or in the future. It would be on exactly the same level, I think, that everyone here who has a startup is currently sitting in. Perhaps Facebook might be able to throw a few more millions at it, but they do not have a solution at the moment. I mean, this white paper is really quite thin on the ground. It's very good in marketing terms, but in actual detail, it's very thin.
But part of that's kind of cool, that they're just going to go do it, you know? That's something I admire about it. Like, who knows what's going to happen?
So what you're suggesting is setting up a DAO for the Libra Association. You'd feel more.
Why not?
Comfortable, confident. I don't know.
You just got to put in 10 million, and then you can have your voice on the table, okay? Just 10 million.
So actually, Julian, I have a question for you regarding self-sovereign identity. Balázs has covered that already quite a bit, but so although the association says that they'll make it possible for users to hold several pseudonymous accounts, Calibra.com, their website, suggests that a KYC process will be built in their system to prevent fraud. And on the Libra white paper, the following is also mentioned. An additional goal of the association, marketing terms, is to develop and promote an open identity standard. We believe that decentralized and portable digital identity is a prerequisite to financial inclusion and competition. My question is how likely, how realistic do you think that is in Facebook engaging into SSI and, you know, actually building it and delivering it to billions of people? Because there's many businesses that are already in the space as well, dealing with, you know, decentralized identity. So,
yeah, and the space is, I believe, one of the most interesting ones at the moment, because there is some action going on right now, and we see adoption happening, and I think it's very realistic. There is a differentiation, though, between compliance and identity, because compliance is kind of like checking the boxes that are provided to you by a certain government for being able to operate a business like a bank. And then there's identity. So for example, you could rely on a KYC AML check for giving a loan, or you could, for example, have a Facebook account information, and it's likely that the second one would be a much better indicator if this person is an actual person and how good this person is in repaying this loan, for example. So even though in practice it might already be the KYC check that you're looking for, it's actually not happening because every country has their own rules around it. Still, I believe that this fosters and pushes the whole industry further, because every bank now has to ask themselves, do I want to be on a proprietary platform that Facebook provides to me? And like, if you're looking at publishers, the answer is likely going to be like, I'm not sure if I just want to be, you know, on a financial app store in a proprietary game. So for us, it's actually helpful because we can tell them, look, there is an alternative. You can actually build your own system where everyone is actually equal, and you know, you have a zero margin protocol running the whole show. So again, would I as a bank participate there? Likely not. But it's just from my experience, it triggers conversations about what alternatives we have, and this is just amazing for the whole industry.
Right. Right. So, do you think that that it could be, because it is mentioned in that paper, although you disagree, rightfully, that there would be a clear separation between financial and personal data. Do you think that it would just be some additional surveillance tool for them, or do you rather see a future in which they provide people with true decentralized identity that our industry has been pushing for some time.
This is happening already. I mean, you have the surveillance tool right here. This is like scanning me wherever I go, and so they have all the data already. It's not changing anything. And also, Facebook isn't like for identity. I don't see Facebook, or for KYC email, Facebook being the big competitor. I think Apple is a lot better equipped to actually fulfill on this promise, and they just announced that they will actually go into the identity space. Interestingly enough, with the privacy promise. So I found that a lot more interesting. And I think it's happening. And I do still think that there is room for a whole other network next to kind of like those proprietary giants that we see evolving here.
All right, so you just mentioned Apple. That leads me to another question I have for all of you is, could there be several global currencies? And if yes, do you think we should expect other GAFAs to build a system of their own? As Amazon is not on that list of validator nodes, yet they have a big consumer base.
I think there's going to be thousands of tokens one day, and I think there's going to be artificial intelligence trading tokens on our behalf at a constant rate. So the thing that excites me most about this is someone starting it from a very commercial point of view. I think I'm kind of excited that it might be a train wreck. I don't know if you catch my vibe at all, but it could be a big train wreck between Facebook and governments and banks. So that's, again, on the personal side, I'm excited about that. On the technology side, let's see what happens, but I don't know, something like that.
I also think there's room for a lot of currencies out there, not only for the billions of people unbanked, but also for all the other different purposes. There is room for probably cryptocurrencies pegged to different fiat currencies. There could also be cryptocurrencies pegged to local basket of goods where fiat currencies actually don't work. There can be things like Libra, which is a different type of currencies. And there can be actually currencies tied to their certain use, if it's like for transactions or for storing value. And this technology just enables us to build this. And therefore, I think the room is there.
Maybe I out myself here. I already think that there are too many global currencies in the world. And at the moment, the only one that's really a safe haven where people go to in a time of crisis is the dollar. And the rest of the global currencies are just there to give some states the idea of sovereignty. But having said that, I think sovereignty and the ability to control national economies are important. But what I definitely do think is at some stage, like we had in the EU, where the euro becomes the de facto currency, I think you're going to have a number of global organizations. We've been talking to some, so Alibaba, Amazon, or BASF. They are currently operating in more than 100 countries. They already have a global currency, if you like. It just sits in their treasury department. So they have to do their own hedging anyway. What the concept of a cryptocurrency does, and maybe this is another issue whether Libra is actually a cryptocurrency or not, but that goes into the definition of a cryptocurrency. You're going to have, I think you're going to have a lot of tokens or currencies which are special purpose for particular companies. And then you may have ecosystems of customers. So I think
utility tokens?
Sorry?
Are you talking about utility tokens?
I mean, utility tokens, security tokens, etc. I think most value can be tokenized. The problem is, and coming back to it, I mean, the problem, and let's also, I think we need to be honest about the world that we're living in. You've got roughly $30 trillion sitting in tax havens. Yeah. So sovereignty actually means very little to the wealthy. All of these topics are mainly for you talking about the vast majority of the middle classes and the working classes. The top 1%, the 30 trillion comes exclusively from them. So I think, and part of the reason we're going to have a problem with doing away with global currencies is because you're going to have very powerful interests who are going to lose a large amount of what is their wealth. So personally, I'm looking forward to the time when slowly but surely these currencies get stripped away. And as these currencies get stripped away and as we get more transparency, we'll see a lot less tax evasion, we'll see a lot less tax havens. And I think this can only be good, better for the world.
So actually, I think the question on this one is, what do we define a currency? I mean, is a cryptocurrency a currency in the classic state? There are people who think that currencies are actually issued by states. So a cryptocurrency, is it more like a payment method? So the question is, do we not get away from our classical idea of currencies? And then I think the question, if there are more than one or is there just one, the question is, do we need several to solve several problems? Because we need adoption. People need to go away from the system that they have been known for a few hundred years and have to go into the digital space. Some of them will always do because it's cool and it's nice, but honestly the question is, what problems do we solve? I think the other speakers have pointed out several problems that are worthy solving. The question will in the end be, do we need or can we agree on one digital kind of money that actually solves these problems, or will we need several ones tackling one problem at a time?
Well, I think we need one that answers a few problems, including the stability and liquidity problems, and a product that can also be rolled out on a massive user base. So that might actually require some part of centralization into the system, which is why I'm asking that question of, should there be a global currency to bank the unbanked and open up for new economic opportunities, especially where these times we are in an era of globalization in which people doubt and we somewhat reach the limits of our exchange of services and products, yet payments and money transfer, money control is still not open for the true global market, and therefore coming up with this idea of a stable money reserve value, however you want to call it, that is not directly tied to any monetary policy, I think is an interesting take on the topic. And to answer what you suggested about having these sub-economies within the economy, I think so far it has proven to be a failure, at least to our scale in the space. Utility tokens as such haven't delivered as much as they promised, and I think there's even more educational work to do. You mentioned, for instance, that it was.
I don't think there's a utility token that exists and is working, is there? I mean, name one. Name a big system using a utility token right now. It's too early.
Okay.
I mean, telecoms aren't using one. Utilities aren't
Binance
using one.
coin is a utility coin.
Who here is using that though? I mean, it's a very slim. Maybe you are.
Yeah, I think everyone is trading is using so either Binance or Leo.
But again, a very slim amount.
Yeah,
I mean, like a fucking slim amount of people, right? People who are in the 1% and have the ability to do that.
It's still a valid use case.
No doubt about it. I'm just saying we haven't seen any even like march towards critical mass on this yet. So we're years away.
All right. Any additional comments to this discussion? Yes, no? Okay, then we'll just, I'll just write these questions that are upvoted, right? So I'll start with, the first one, okay. Do you think Facebook's approach, which resembles the one of Hashgraph, is a betrayal of the ideas the anarchist creators of Bitcoin, cypherpunks, had in mind? It's not me who came up with this question, so.
Definitely, I mean, without a doubt. It's even Hedera. When Hedera came up with this, it was well, I think you guys are part of Hedera, right? Yeah, it's corporates in the governance body, so it's a completely centralized governance body of a few large companies. Personally, I don't like that model. I'm sure there are people who do, and the business models from there and the business models for corporates are very useful. Personally, philosophically, I don't like the idea, but as a betrayal of the original principles, without a doubt. Yeah.
Right.
I doubt they cared.
You?
I doubt they cared about it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious. I just I don't really understand why. Yeah, the question is here as well in the first place. Yes, or a question or a comment. Yes, please do.
I just wanted to point out that there is a very important difference between the header hash graph model and the Libra model of governance in terms of being centralized just right now. Maybe it seems to be similar, but in case of Hedera, it's a termed, so timely termed for maximum 6 years for all the members of the governance council and governance body, and afterwards they are rotating. So they're not incentivized to do something good for them and bad for the others, which is not true for the Libra approach. So, but on the other hand, it's also an interesting question, what are the alternatives? So should I trust an unknown group of developers, some kind of community, or what they try to do with these big organizations to bootstrap trust with hopefully trustable organizations, and then you can, of course, ask the question whether they are really trustworthy. I mean, PayPal and Visa and all the others have proven to cut off critical people from the financial system, so I wouldn't trust them, maybe even if they are big, maybe because of they're big. But the other model is questionably better, or maybe not. I just have an unknown group of people controlling it, and then another one who makes a fork, which makes it problematic if you have a real application on it. So.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, I think I'll just move on to the next question. This one I like. Setting aside, oh yeah, I don't need the mic. Setting aside what might be threats coming out of Libra, what are your highest hopes that Libra could potentially enable? Any hopes?
Progress. I actually think it's interesting. I mean, I'm not so worried about Libra. I think that actually there's another question thinking about if someone else will come up with this. I think if all big corporations come up with their own cryptocurrencies, they basically put Xbox points on blockchain, conquests. So every one of them will use their own payment system, but they won't endanger our freedom. But at least they will put resources into them, hopefully, and hopefully provides us with some progress on the technological level, also fail in some ways that are probably interesting and teach us something about them, so that actually we can hopefully go to the next generation of this movement.
I mean, I think I've been quite negative about Libra, but there's a massive potential advantage in that what I think something like Facebook will do is there's a usability behind it. And I think one of the key problems with adoption at the moment in crypto is the usability is actually limited. The second point is that there won't be this combination between a crypto wallet and a web wallet, because most people just don't have the time to switch money from, or move currencies from their crypto wallet into their web wallet and therefore to use it. And I think the most important one for me with this large the most important potential is that people have this behavior psychology, you have a risk psychology. If you think something's going to fail and 2.38 billion people are going to fail with you, you're more likely to use it. That's just human nature. If you think something's going to fail and you only got 100 or 200 people, you are less likely to use it. And so I think from a behavioral perspective, Facebook could be a massive education for the whole crypto space.
Yeah, also the access or the target that they have, that they actually focus on developing markets, I think is quite interesting, because it wasn't exactly the Silicon Valley model to focus on Africa or the poorer parts of Southeast Asia. And there lies a huge potential to give accessible to those consumers, and thus also have a wave of new services that build on top of it.
I just have to chime in again, banking is a utility for people who have excess wealth, and the unbanked clearly don't. I don't know why Facebook and this group thinks maybe they can address that, right?
But when you're in Shanghai, you have a beggar in the street showing you their iPhones, because they don't have money anymore. This is like they just leapfrog.
That's fine. So you can go give a few bucks to a guy in the street corner. What does he do with it then?
But you know, like on a very basic level, like of course you don't start with like insuring your new bike or whatever, but like you want to buy a utility to open up a store, and yeah, they do get $2,000-3,000 that they want to take out to start a business, and this is exactly the type of loan that we direly need there. And I think the defaults will be low and the interest will be extremely high, at least for us, and it will be extremely low for them because right now they pay like 30%.
Yeah, I'll be more convinced when I see that kind of action being taken by Facebook.
Yeah, but we haven't also made that work, right? We as like the blockchain community. We've talked about it for sure.
And I think coming from Celo, I really have to double down on if you really want to be inclusive, if you want to really foster financial inclusion, you have to build an open system where everybody is able to earn rewards in that system, where everybody is able to take part in the system, and not only a chosen few. And I think for sure, Facebook gains a lot of attention, but the government of Venezuela also had a lot of attention for the petro, and then people said, oh wow, this is nice, I use Bitcoin.
I think it's, and this is, the Bitcoin or the blockchain community is incredibly cynical, yeah? Because at the moment, we have been doing some work in Africa, and the largest percentage of blockchain wallets is actually being used in Africa. Yeah, there are 40 million mobile wallets, and people are using Stellar, they're using Bitcoin, they're using Ripple.
Right.
But it's not a massive business market, so it's a very good marketing campaign, and that's why the African Women's Banking Group is right at the front.
Right.
Yeah? And I think we just need to be, personally, when I see such cynical marketing, it just makes me ill. Yeah. I think we need, if people want to make money, they need to be transparent and honest, they're making money. They don't need to go and use the most vulnerable people on the planet to push themselves into the limelight. That just makes me nauseous. Yeah.
All right, so I think that's it for this panel discussion. Probably, hopefully, the speakers will remain around for some time if you have some questions for them. Please, big round of applause for them.
From my side, many thanks, Christoph, Julian, Clem, thank you so much.
Cheers.
John. Marvin, thank you so much. For the audience, I have one more fun point, is actually we have a poll also going on. So if you join us on Slido, is actually the governance, the socio-economic side, and the humanitarian aspect of Libra, is that good, better, ugly? We have a 15-minute break, so go get a drink, answer the question. We'll be back in 10 to 15 minutes. See you soon. You figure it out. Yo. Kannst du das Bild umschließen? Jo. Jo. All right. Perfect. No, not right now. Later. Ja, ja. Setzt euch hin und dann. Ja.
Did you hear that Facebook is down?
All right, we are all set for the second panel. The panelists are ready. I'm ready. It looks like you are still getting your last drink, so I would welcome you to indeed get your drink from wherever you want to get it from. Take a seat. There's some free seats again. And join us for the technical panel on Libra. Okay, so welcome to the second panel, the technical panel on Libra, and this is going to be a very interesting panel, and I'm not sure if you heard about it, but actually the moment that we started with the first panel, Facebook was down. We have nothing to do with this, I promise you. So, if I can introduce to you Artiona Bogo, software engineer and business development manager at SAP Blockchain, the team behind blockchain-based solutions for SAP customers and partners. Artiona helps large enterprise reimagine cross-company business processes with blockchain so as to unlock business value, as well as evaluates new tech relevant to SAP's blockchain service offering. As active member of the Berlin-based blockchain ecosystem, Artiona also runs the Hyperledger Meetup Berlin. Please, warm welcome for Artiona Bogo. You already met the second panelist. Balázs Némethi is not only great at explaining Libra, he's also an invited expert for the World Economic Forum's Digital Identity Task Force and has now been a core contributor to the decentralized identity space. He is a principal at Eternity Consulting, a strategy blockchain consulting firm that specializes in delivering real-world solutions. Eternity is a member of BerChain, and welcome back, Balázs. There you are. Peter Grooskopf is Managing Director and CTO of the Stuttgart Digital Exchange, a trading platform for digital assets such as cryptocurrencies and other tokenized financial instruments. Prior to that, he co-founded Solaris Bank AG and built up the banking platform as a CTO, where one of his focal points was also the blockchain topic. Warm applause for Peter Grooskopf. And Björn Wagner is Chief Commercial Officer at Parity. Björn is driving the company's commercialization, partnership, and product efforts. He holds a Master of Science in Mechanical Engineering from RWTH Aachen University and studied at the University of California, Santa Barbara, as well as Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. Give it up for Björn Wagner from Parity. And last but not least, let me introduce our moderator for today, Diana, the CEO and co-founder of ZK Systems, a blockchain infrastructure layer which enables equipment as a service and automated smart factories. Diana is a serial entrepreneur and had a successful exit a few years ago. She originally started her career in China, is fluent in 8 languages, and is a founding member of BerChain. Good luck, guys. You get 1 hour of my time.
Great. Thank you, Silvan, for the great introduction. And I'm so excited to be in this panel. In the first panel, we went, as you see, there was a very good overview about Libra and Facebook's role in it. And I think in this panel, we can really dive deep into the technical architecture and technical solution of it. So let's start with the first question, which I have for you, Artiona. Artiona, you at SAP, you lead the blockchain team as a software engineer and business development manager. And you mostly work on corporate projects, meaning that you have a lot of experience with permissioned chains. Now, the question to you is, how do you see Facebook? Will it transition, Facebook's Libra, will it transition from a permission chain to permissionless chain? How do you see that?
Thanks for the question. So first of all, I have to say that for NDA reasons, I have to be here representing myself and not like the perspective of SAP. So I'm not sure why John did what he did and like put me in such position, like disclosing even more things that he probably was supposed to disclose. I don't know if he's here or wrong, but so yeah, I'm here to say what I think about this and like yeah, share my thoughts on the research that I did, and like it was a lot of extensive reading. Yeah, really appreciate the work that Balázs did in a very short amount of time, very kind of holistic approach, and like the panel was really great. So it will be a challenge for us to actually go a little bit deeper into technical discussions and like bring it to the audience in an understandable way. Coming to the answer to what you actually asked before. So yes, being in the permission space, and like I really can talk passionately about that because I think there are a lot of use cases that corporations can leverage using blockchains or DLT, and they don't necessarily need to be permissionless. We can debate about that off-chain, so not here. So also because, yeah, oftentimes in meetups, people are really passionate about permissionless chains, and I am the one to actually be thrown tomatoes because I'm there representing big corporations and like what they do on their not so exciting backend processes. Yes, so I think I would like to be pragmatic, and like I like Facebook's approach of putting it very bluntly that yes, they also like permissionless, but they know very well that what they're actually proposing is not permissionless. It's permission and it's not fully decentralized. So yeah. Of course, otherwise, if they would try to hide that, they would be even more hated, I think. So they outline in their permissionless blockchain paper, they outline all the benefits. So why should they think that the long-term vision should be permissionless, but why they are starting with another approach, which is basically from a set of 27 members that will run those validator nodes. So basically what Facebook is doing is they are decentralizing centralization. So at least that's the starting point. And the reason why they do so is because it was also asked before, so John asked why cannot do that with Bitcoin, right? So they outline in that paper that they do not believe that there is any provided solution out there that is capable of tackling stability, scale, and security for 2.6 billion of people transacting with one another at scale with the current offered permissionless chain. So they had to invent one, so it kind of seems quite legit, right? But how can they leverage on one side the immense user base that they have, and on the other side directly build a permissionless system? So they had to start from some point, and that's why they created the association. So the founding members actually have as duty to vote in a democratic and collective way to actually validate transactions, and they also have a say on the governance. But they also, yeah, we heard a lot before in the panel that there are a lot of marketing terms, so it's their effort to make it sound, I mean, we don't have to be so cynic, but they are also trying to not be bashed. So they say that the perspective of the members should be geographically distributed, so that the voices there are not only those of corporations, but also academic institutions, multilateral companies like NGOs, and so on. So that is one way how they try to kind of decentralize that initial centralization. And of course, the second important thing here is that the collateral that they have actually established. established. So it's distributed, it's not decentralized. So those are also questions that they outline. How can we go to a more decentralized reserve? But basically, they wanted to create a coin that, starting from day one, can be used as value as medium of exchange and also as a store of value, right? And that's why they claim to be very picky in how they actually choose the funds, the reserves, the currencies that are packed into that basket. And what they propose and the road towards this decentralization is that what can be initially considered as the Libra investment token, basically representing the voting power of those members that have some reputation or like that were selected based on reputation, the transition from the Libra investment tokens should be towards the Libra coin, because anytime that there is new issuance of Libra investment tokens, anyone can participate, similar to Ethereum's proof of stake, so that anyone can actually own those coins. And then the transition of the system is from the Libra investment tokens to those that actually own Libra coins that can also validate transactions. But of course, there are so many open... Yes, do you want to interrupt me? It's like long time. Yes, go ahead.
Not to add, but basically, it's just to relate to the question, it's probably a bit weak try from Facebook not to go permissionless. The technology is getting available. Many of us in the room and much more people around the world have been working on technologies that could enable that to happen. Those who are following the technology development around Libra a bit deeply, there was issue 83, which actually proposed a way how to make the current available code base permissionless, and it was removed from GitHub. Why they didn't push it into becoming a DAO instead of like making a legal consortia? Really big question, because also DAOs are developing, and it would have been something that they really add to the community to push through a DAO in Switzerland and not say 1.7 billion and unbanked, we're just gonna make it happen and see how it grows, and if it gets support, we're gonna throw in as much money as we can because we have it. And instead of creating an alternative permission system, VID-backed, the level of, personally I think it's ingenious to not peg it to any other currency if you are E-Corp. But creating a currency that is not governed by any other central bank, it's gonna call out every single central bank in one way or another, because it's a sovereign country's right to issue money. Now you give it to for-profit corporations, you're going to run into issues. And so not trying to decentralize or create a permissionless system, it's just like not trying hard enough, and they can hire the best people. They could hire almost everyone if they want to, because they can pay the salaries. Maybe they are not that decentralized and everything, but they could have. So that's sort of my take on this question.
Yeah, from my point of view, what I found a bit funny while reading the white paper was, first of all, what I always say is that a permission blockchain is not a blockchain in my point of view, because I believe in open data and kind of also open business processes and so on and so forth. So you use that platform and you use it for your own way, and therefore, like, being permissioned somehow contradicts to the principles that I personally have. But matching this with also what has been said in the first panel, so that there's almost any buzzword used in the white paper quite often. I find it a bit funny that they're talking about a distributed database and not so much about blockchain. And that's a bit of a funny side note, because I think this also shows a bit of the ambition that they have while designing that system.
I would be incredibly interested to understand, like, who here thinks that they have a really good understanding of what permissioned and unpermissioned means. Right, okay. So maybe let's start there. So, you know, in my definition, right, and everybody has a different definition of that. Like, at the very least, in a non-unpermissioned network, right, in a non-permissioned network, the functioning of the system is not contingent of a single actor or a small party of actors. So that's why what Facebook is building right now is very much a permission system. You have a small number of actors, let's say, currently in the 20s, forming this Libra association, and they are running the system. And they can take any governance decisions around the system, how the software should be updated, who should be able to participate in it and not, right? They effectively can censor whatever they want. Now, the question was, right, overall, like, hey, how reasonable is it to assume that they actually will be successful with transitioning to an unpermissioned network within 5 years, right? So I think I'm very skeptical about that for basically 4 reasons. And there are 4 different areas that needs to be, looked at. One area is governance incentives, right? So the governance model behind us, 2/3, I think, can vote on certain things, and then they come to a decision how that should change. For example, the software. Now, these members of this association became members because they made an investment, right? They got this investment token. And that investment token gives them a few things. And one of the things they get from doing that is a cut of the returns from the money they make from the reserves float, right? So this thing might actually make money. And if, let's say, that actually takes, really gains traction over the next years and it has a few billion users, that might be significant returns. And there's nothing in the governance structure right now that would, force these members to at some point say like, oh, we give up control and we add new members to this association or the systems and we cut the shares. So there's nothing in terms of incentives that, would, encourage them to actually go down that route. So that's a governance incentive way. On a legal side, there are issues as well, right? So for example, Libra is supposed to be this stable coin that's backed by a basket of different fiat currencies, right? Now, in order to receive fiat currencies, you need bank accounts, right? And for bank accounts, you need an entity or a name on an entity or like a person, right? So somebody needs to own that bank account. Now, who is that going to be if you have a fully permissionless system and only, the software decides who to give tokens to or for whom to mint tokens? Now, well, most likely it's the association's name on the bank account, but who controls the association? It got to be members. So at the end of the day, there are big, big question marks around that, right? So I don't think it's very reasonable to assume at this point that it can turn into a permissionless system.
Yes, okay. So the problem they're trying to solve is how do they enable trust? Because if they just go on their own and propose I don't know, Bitcoin or any of the coins out there that you think might be scalable enough to support billions of transactions, of course everyone will just be even more skeptical about it. So my question would be, how would you make it work? They have also, if we would all bash Facebook here, I'm not so pro Libra or Calibra, but it would just be a very boring panel if all of us don't try to kind of have both pros and cons of what they were trying to do. How would you make it work straight away? And how would you implement a permissionless system from the very beginning?
Yeah.
Balázs?
So the issue here is not do it work today, because that's why they put this 5-year time frame as well, because if they would be serving 1 billion people, they need much more through output than what any of the blockchains today can actually offer. Facebook internally, of course, all their technologies are able, they're super centralized, and we have not solved that. But the question is that Facebook, with its mighty power, why not trying to push the technology, and why it's just reusing already existing open source technologies, making it sexier, and basically just make a very compelling argument to create a new form of stable coin which might make sense. And in my opinion, because of the scale of Facebook, this is a very different conversation. That's why we are sitting here, because they can do it. Doesn't matter what is the technology, they don't need the other 26. they alone can push it out. Regardless of everything that's Facebook been receiving in public, their revenue went up quarter after quarter in the last 7 years. They can put out whatever they want if they want to make it use and force people to use it. Yes, they might lose like 100 million users. Sure. But if they're gonna be issuing money on a global scale, let's put away the regulatory parts. I mean, that's pretty sweet. Like, I would love to issue money on my will and say that I'm gonna back it up with government bonds. They will yield me money in 10 years because they are backed, so I can issue more money that actually exists. Who says no to the scale that they can invest? They would have more money in 2-3 years than most development banks. They could fund whatever they want because they sit on so much money. So like all these questions on like permissioned or permissionless, if they want to make it work, they can. They don't need anyone else. Why they need them? Because there are regulations which maybe in this situation actually going to help it or limit it, and that's why they invited other companies, because it looks much better towards regulators. How we would make the technology, I think like there are like many interesting scaling technologies, if that was the questions, which do need a lot of research. Maybe Facebook could have put out 10 million for grants to actually solve scaling. I think they have the money. Maybe Libra Association could have put out different grants to solve it. Not Facebook, of course, because they are more now. So like, I think it's just Facebook not trying hard enough, kind of going back. But on the other hand, hell yeah, it's a good idea. And this is something that did trigger a lot of organizations' interest in let's regulate cryptocurrencies. Let's look at them much more thoroughly. Because until now, small startups, sorry header hash graph, small companies tried to reach other corporates and convince them to change their business models. If Facebook is willing to do it, there is no other company like Facebook. That's a different game. And like, maybe not Facebook, maybe not this cryptocurrency, but something like this makes a lot of sense. And like the head of Bank of England, he also welcomed that like stable coins are very welcomed by the Bank of England. They would be very willing to manage those currencies with accounts that they manage because it makes a lot of sense. Like Sweden is pushing it from a regulatory perspective. But like, is it Facebook? Is it not Facebook? Is it Libra? Really big question. They are being scrutinized a lot because of many things.
Yeah. So, but I think that's the interesting question. So whether now Facebook is starting that initiative, and I must really say when I saw or when I read the white paper for the first time, I must really say positively surprised, because I thought that something completely different would come out of their, like, let's say, press. So from my perspective, they thought about like quite a lot of things. But still, the question remains kind of how this thing develops, and you just said it. They sit on top of a bucket of a basket of assets, and once they used it to gain trust for their new currency, then they can do almost the same things as central banks are doing, and kind of handing out more money and so on and so forth, and really do like money politics. And I think this is where it starts to get dangerous, right? And from my point of view, and this would be a bit the hope that I have, because we've maybe all seen this letter of the government in the US, kind of, hey, Facebook, please stop it, because we don't have a clear opinion yet, which is like, from my point of view, the funniest thing I've ever seen, because regulation usually does not or should not work like that. Regulation is there to kick in when somebody kind of gets a damage. So, for example, if people get I don't know, frauded or something, then the regulator kicks in and just decides that there's some impact kind of on the whole economy, and then the regulator starts to act, kind of front running that it's not allowed to do that on exchanges and so on and so forth. This is just the matter of like keeping the markets as fair as possible to all participants. And in the end, when the government says like, hey, please wait with your product because we're not ready to have opinion yet, that's quite funny from my point of view. And from my point of view, regulation cannot kick in that moment because it never happened before. And therefore, I think the only way to really kind of also put things into discussion is that we accelerate in having real currencies or like also governmental currencies on the blockchain way. So you spoke about the example in Sweden that I personally also find quite interesting, because the government in Sweden simply took the decision that they don't take any share in the money market anymore, because everybody's using credit cards and debit cards, and therefore the whole economy or currency system in Sweden just relies on the banks. And if one bank goes bankrupt, then kind of the effect is so it's systemic from the very first situation, and therefore I think the movement that now should happen is to have governments pushing also the, let's say, digital euros, and maybe also an alternative to that, because I think that would be the right answer.
Okay, maybe we'll move to another question. So it's definitely a very controversial topic about Facebook, Libra going permissionless or not. But what's also interesting, given all the other permissionless chains, well, let's say Ethereum, what do you think, is actually Libra potentially competing with this? Or are they actually maybe driving more adoption for the permissionless chains? So maybe I'd like to know Bjorn's opinion on this. I know that you have strong opinions around permissionless and permission chains.
Well, generally I think permission chains fundamentally don't compete with permissionless chains, right? So lots of people talk about decentralization, right? And like what I'm of a strong opinion of is that decentralization is really just a means to an end. Like decentralization is no end by itself, right? Nobody cares about decentralization in itself, by and in itself. But what we care about is censorship resistant, right? We care about how robust and resilient a system is and how empowered an individual is. And that's really where we try to get with permissionless systems. So on that end, I don't think Libra competes with any of the permissionless systems out there, be it current existing systems such as Bitcoin, which is seen by most probably nowadays as digital gold, or Ethereum and so forth, right? I think that's a large part. Now, if we look at what kind of opportunity Libra as a movement is for the overarching permissionless blockchain space, I think I have some rather large hopes that Libra will actually bring good to our other projects, right, in the permissionless space. And that's mainly because if they do it right, they might educate like a couple billion people what it means to hold digital assets, what private public key cryptography actually is. And that might, if we're really lucky, lead to this kind of, what have I read, this inflection point that we've seen from that Netscape was for, MySpace was for HTTP, right? Maybe Libra is that for cryptocurrencies, right? And for permissionless systems.
Okay. I mean, on the cryptography side, like WhatsApp and Messenger, I'm not sure if people use it. Everyone uses it for, or like other encrypted messages, or more the UI. But like holding the digital asset, I go with that.
No, I absolutely agree. It really depends on the implementation of the onboarding process, right? On the on-ramp, right? If it ends up that that Calibra stays a custodial wallet, which basically means They, keep your private key. If you lose your credentials, your password, you just email them. You do another KYC check, and they're like, here we go, you have it back, right? If that's the case, no, it's not going to help us, right? But if there are loads of other wallets, and maybe Libra at some point says like, we don't want to be in custody of your, all your money. You keep your own key. You maintain your own key. Then this is a rather large opportunity, right? Because no one else has achieved to educate the larger population what that means. And I think that is an opportunity.
Yeah, so I can really agree, and probably it's also the first step moving forward, kind of not placing like thousands of euros in that system, and so I think people will start to use it kind of to, I don't know, pay their lunch or something like that, and then I think they very slowly get into that ecosystem and realize how it works. Because I think this has been a bit of the criticism of myself, just like when thinking about decentralization as it's now, that it's for many people still too difficult. And that many people are not really aware and probably not willing and probably also not able to become their own bank. So because they can't really take that burden on their shoulders, and I think so when people start to learn how this works and also get some or really understand how they can trust into the system and so on, I think that's a huge benefit that we all working in decentralization can get benefits from.
I mean, or they really don't want to be their own bank, like,
or they don't know that they should want that.
So yeah, of course, but like, when you're like you work 10 hours a day. It's just the last thing that you don't want to, what was my password? And you can recall it and it's happy ever after. The situation is that it's not a proprietary problem for the most population of the world. Because privacy is not something that people acknowledge or care about. And it's very far from internet access, food shelter, of course, but it becomes more interesting once you're engaged with the digital space. But for very long, as you are just a consumer, for many people it matters zero. Just to imagine that your bank account, your bank, if you call them, wouldn't give you a bank card because you lost it. It's not a thing that they can imagine. And, we are sort of talking about that direction. So I don't want to push this conversation very bashing Facebook, but the whole Libra thing without Facebook would look much better for me.
Of course, just without the users of Facebook, right? That's the problem. How do you get those?
No, if Facebook would join up to something like a global currency, which is backed by interesting and positively rated companies, and they would also invite human rights organizations in their circles. Let's put that way. But it's super interesting that we are talking about a permission blockchain. But it's because of the scale of Facebook. It's just so different than anything else existed before. And could it become a global currency? That's a really good question because it could. It doesn't sound really well for the decentralization because it's a super centralization move, and yeah, they might decentralize it, but how? Could it help 1.7 billion people? Could it make our lives better? It's a big question. The identity aspect, just to bring back that topic, is very unclear. They are talking about decentralized identity. Calibra white paper talks a lot about regulations, but let's put up a Calibra itself as the tweet that I showed earlier. There will be any company can do. But it's interesting that any company do they need to verify a company? They didn't say like anyone. They said in the tweet, any company can do. Companies are registered with legal owners. So like that's also an interesting part. I know you didn't have time to read the tweet. There are just so many questions that we don't know about the whole governance. Actually, there is no governance for the whole foundation. It's supposed to be being discussed throughout July. Those who are really interested, on the 16th and 17th of July, then there is going to be Senate hearings in the US about Libra. And Markus, what's his name?
David Markus.
Yeah, David Markus is going to represent and answer questions, not Zuckerberg, because David Markus is the head of Calibra and the Libra Foundation, not Zuckerberg. Clearly he knows much more. He's an interesting person as well, but that's gonna shed a lot of light, because there is that only one opportunity to be the first Senate hearing by the most mightiest government. And if that goes bad, the project is gonna be very likely halted. And if that goes well, we might need another conversation to have fairly soon.
Mm-hmm.
This is beeping very annoyingly.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry for that.
So I have another question. So currently, considering the current blockchain ecosystem, speaking about Cosmos, Polkadot, Ethereum and others, what's your take? How does Libra actually fit into this ecosystem, particularly from the technical design? So who'd like to take this question?
It's not a blockchain. So it's not like Cosmos or Polkadot. It's more like header, hashgraph, IOTA, and the other Tangle-based. It's also not Tangle. It's a Merkle tree-based. Therefore, it's not blockchain. So like it has a technology. It's a database as well. It builds differently. It requires different mechanisms. Yes, it needs consensus, of course, but like that doesn't make it into a blockchain. It's going to have a different development path. Those scaling mechanisms that are being developed by some of the mentioned projects might, or actually can't really apply for this. So it's yet another technology. It might scale, but it's not the newest version of what could have been done.
Yeah, and also I was a bit surprised that they start kind of build their completely new own technology when they kind of took some shares like from different concepts that are already there. So like having these buckets of assets. So that's a bit the MakerDAO approach, and of course there's an Ethereum. There's other concepts, and yeah, they even invented their own language that needs to gain a community of developers that want to use it and build applications for it. And I think that's, yeah, of course, the big tech giants always have the budget to start something completely from the scratch. But I think they didn't reinvent much, and so you mentioned something a little bit earlier that kind of still just goes in my head, because you mentioned that it's making this legal entity sitting in Geneva a DAO could have been like an improvement where they would put something into community, where they maybe also with their power would push something forward, which would be kind of, let's say, the next, or the step after the next step for everything we do here, to kind of get the next level of applications. And I think this could have been a battle that they can win for us.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, Balázs, in your initial introduction to Libra, you also spoke about having 4 currencies bundled to an average, basically, is not a good usability. So, my question to you: do you have basically a better solution or an alternative solution that you would have implemented if you could?
So, It's 4 currencies plus a lot of government bonds from undescribed sources. The idea of creating a currency that is not backed to others, I think, is ingenious. For the sake of having a global currency, it could have, like, it is, I think, a very, very forward-thinking move. Making it usable is much, much more complicated because it's not gonna be sponsored by anyone, but, like, of course, for-profit companies. And it brings so much scrutiny. So if Facebook would have gone down the easy road, which in many aspects sometimes they did, it could have just be a USD tethered coin. Yes, it exists, sure, not at Facebook scale. So it would have been much easier, and it doesn't mean just you just buying USD as much as possible. You can still buy a basket of money and tie them to the USD then, because that idea is great for a permissioned currency. But in this way, I think, like, they got into a situation which is unsolved, undescribed, so, like, actually there is no answer. They might at the end just peg it to the USD because it's straightforward. And if I would like to make money, I think this is awesome because those companies are gonna make so much money. Like, it's maybe like government yield, low yield government bonds, 1-2%. It's not much, but it's not only. They don't describe what can and cannot be invested. There is no governance model yet. They can invest in startups as well. Why not? They can make a lot of money, and that's very clear that none of the interest will go back to the normal token holders. It will be R&D, marketing, and then the rest is distributed among the 100 companies, which is always interesting. Of course, they could make money on other ways, sure, but since they manage the value of the currency and they sit on the actual money, it is a good place to be in roulette.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, Peter, a question to you. So you're heading Digital Asset Exchange Börse Stuttgart. So have you already thought of taking Libra into your exchange? What are your initial thoughts on that?
Well, we are not that far yet, so that we can really ask us that question. But from my point of view, if this will become a means of payment for people that that want to use it, and well, I assume that once it will go public, then it will have traction. Then it will become highly relevant for almost any financial institution or financial company which is out there. And from my point of view, and it's also interesting to me that well, there is no bank represented in the consortia yet, and I think so. If I see the whole movement out of the perspective of a bank, I would be really afraid about it, because in the end, kind of everything that a bank does could also be implemented on top of Libra, right? And well, I also mentioned that idea to I know some bankers pretty closely, but yeah, so of course. So if people want to invest into digital assets in the future, into security tokens, if they want to purchase different financial instruments in the future, then they should be Euro, they should be USD, and if Libra gets adoption, then also of course Libra and all the alternatives that we have in the digital space.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. So I have another question to you, Peter. I know that you work closely with BaFin and with regulators. So what is your take on Libra versus regulators? Well, so we've heard some comments. So for example, from US regulators, what's going to happen down the road? What do you think?
Well, that's a very interesting question. So from my point of view, I would assume that that BaFin will wait first what happens, and also what happens in the US, because I think BaFin has been always quite, let's say, senseful in reacting. I don't want to say slow, so I just say senseful meaning that they don't shoot something out just like out of nothing, and then they sleep at night over it and think like, oh shit, what did we say yesterday? We have to change it. And also from my perspective, this is what BaFin is also doing right, in my point of view, that they also don't rush into something. Because sometimes it's really like a 360-degree perspective that they need to take, and I think they will do the same here. Mm-hmm. But so if I would make a guess, I would believe that BaFin would give it a go.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Just a funny comment. So the Russian finance minister actually welcomed Libra. And then in the same interview, he clarified that ruble is the used currency to buy services and goods. So like, there are different takes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so last question for this panel before we move to the Q&A session. This question is to Artiona, and so I know that you've worked a lot with permission chains. I know that you've also looked a lot at the part of scalability. How do you actually estimate, from the technical perspective, the scalability of Libra?
I don't think that the technical paper actually outlines what could possibly be reached after 5 years, so at the moment when they intend to be fully public, but as of today in the testnet, I think they have reached something like 1,000 of transactions per second among 100 validators, with transaction finality of 10 seconds. So basically the difference between the time when the transaction is actually happening and when it is committed to the ledger. So when it is transmitted and then committed to the ledger. But of course you can imagine that if they intend to open up the validation right to more and more nodes, so the number of validators will increase, so performance will go down. So it will be very interesting to see how they plan to scale this. They don't give any right or like a final answer how they plan to do this. Rather, they'd open up some grants for researchers to actually solve these problems. And I think these are also the challenges that the Ethereum protocol has been kind of trying to solve for the past years and so on. So those still remain unanswered at this point in time. There is not any final claim on what they think that the scalability will actually be like, but they claim that it will be decent enough to cope with 2.6 billion of people making like everyday life transactions.
All right. Any other comments from you guys?
Yeah. So basically, if you look at the papers that Facebook published so far, I find it quite uninspiring what they've pushed out so far. Maybe except the move stuff. So they are smart contract language, right? They're VM. Besides that, it looks kind of like it's not particularly cutting edge at all, right? They use a PBFT derivative. Fairly established consensus engine by now, right? It's called Libra BFT. They put their own name on it, but it's basically hot stuff based on this hot stuff paper. They aim for 1,000 transactions per second. This is achievable today. Nothing special on that end at all, in my opinion. But it also won't facilitate the use case that they're talking about, right? Providing a payment network for like billions of people. So we are far away from that, and it doesn't. They don't draw out a roadmap how they will get there. So any kind of conversations around like will it be scalable? We don't know. We have to see, right?
Makes sense. All right. So at this point, let's move to the Q&A session. And before we get to the questions which we see here on the screen, I'd like to ask the audience, are there any questions in the audience which we could first take? So, thank you. Go ahead.
Hi there. I'm really enjoying this. Everybody, great job. Fantastic. So, I just reflected for a second. I thought, well, we are all 100% on what they have put out.
they have put out a white paper, which at first reading just makes your face palm. At least that's my first reaction. It's just like, oh my God, why did they write that? Why do they punish me now reading this? Because I go to this meetup tonight. Anyways, but if you now think, well, is this the real deal? Is this what they really want? Or is this just the thing that the test balloon that they throw out and see, oh, let's see. This is maybe something that people could relate to, could talk about, gives a great discussion, good point, bad points, Facebook bashing, and so on and so forth, just to set the frame, and then, I don't know, in a year or so, then they start with the real deal. Is that what's going on? Are they just gaming us, like wasting 2 hours of everybody's brain power here in the room, and maybe more, right?
I mean, it's an interesting question, and to your point, if you look at the white paper, it's signed by 7 people, but it's 53, but it's not signed by Zuckerberg, nor is it signed by David Marcus, right? So neither of the two actually put their name under it. So it could tell something like, oh, it's more of let's really test the waters and see how the reaction is to that. I mean, to your point earlier, right? They have tried to bring in this kind of payment rail earlier in previous times, right? With Facebook Financial and so forth, right? They needed to provide value-added services to do what Tencent has been doing in China, right? To add WeChat, to provide value-added services around WeChat, to make money. Like Facebook has trouble making money by now, right? Or to grow, at least to grow, right? They're a business. They actually have trouble around that. So, and one interesting point to think about is maybe, they seem to, it might play into their hand that they say for running this network, this payment network in somewhere now, you don't need KYC. Who needs KYC are the onboarding, the on-ramp players, like Calibra, so their own company, their own wallet provider. Because what that would enable them, let's think for a moment that they integrate Calibra into WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram. Suddenly, that allows them to reconcile their users across these platforms. Because currently in WhatsApp, they don't necessarily know which the users are compared to Facebook, to some extent, right? And beyond that, obviously, it lets them, don't expect evil, but it would potentially let them connect financial data, financial transaction history to these identities. And
that's super valuable.
And super scary.
Back to your question, I don't think it's a waste of time. Intention, so sort of the urban legend, I don't work at Facebook, so I only read about it, is that about 2 years ago, this whole blockchain team was set up. I think it has an internal name that can be found, the blockchain team, and was asked to make proposals, and they made 3 proposals, a light one, a middle, and a more ambitious one. Proposed it to the company's CEO, and the CEO chose the ambitious one. They hired a lot of people, then they released the Libra papers. What if it doesn't work? I mean, Cambridge Analytica, it can't go bad. They already received hundreds of millions of positive conversation. I mean, yes, this community doesn't talk about it that positively. Yes, governments, but none of the mattering organization bashed it. It's about interest, about a potentially positive outcome. If we don't talk about technology, we don't talk about a lot of those things that we mentioned, the hope or goal. There is a lot of open questions of how it's going to work, how it's going to operate, how it's going to get regulated. Could it work? At this moment, yes, because it's very far from actually being able to be used. So I don't think it's a waste, and that's why I also accepted to present about it, because it is very interesting, and those problems that they write down are legit. I don't know if I can say that, not every government will be able to provide
services to their citizens. So inviting for-profit organizations solving problems is potentially a faster way to do it. Whether if it's one of the scariest organizations who should be involved in it or not, this is a very different conversation. But do we want financial inclusion or to be solved, or we want to give a plastic card to everyone? This is another question, which is always needs to be discussed, but not having human rights organizations involved, I think, is also an issue.
To be honest, I think that what can come after this scares even Facebook, and maybe that's what gets them excited to keep on working on this, because obviously it's very little the amount of people that belong to the category, if I don't trust Facebook with my data, why would I trust them with my money? So people just don't think about that. That's a matter of fact, that very few people care about privacy. And I think that this is just going to be kind of end up, unless it is regulated or brute force stopped, in something which is kind of too big to fail, but we will see that. So.
Yeah. And I think for Facebook starting such an initiative and moving into that space is totally valid, because in the end they also want to diversify their business model and just make sure that potentially like the advertising could also kind of fall into pieces. So my thinking is that something like the advertising market should be decentralized as well, kind of dealing with like audiences, how many visitors I have and so on and so forth. So there could be also more open markets about that, or there are projects working on that. But I think there's like challenges from different sides, also for a company like Facebook, and therefore it's totally valid to move into the financial game. And yeah, so but we will see how this turns out for them.
Okay, so can I have the microphone? Peter, can I have the microphone? Thank you. So let's see. Who's first? Maybe you had a question?
Many thanks. One question, sorry for redundancy. Hi, brilliant discussion. In the matter of fact, or against the background that Facebook is under California law and it's based over there, and over California law we have American law, which is so-called regulated by SEC, and we have actually discussion in the American Senate about the positives and negatives, and assuming that probably there's becoming a no for Libra by American state, what do you assume will be the lesson learned out of the Libra approach? So what can we learn about it, and what will be coming probably next, and what are the next games? So can we assume something from Amazon or whatever? So I'm pretty curious about. Many thanks.
Just to give a quick reply, there is a lot of interesting ways how it can play out. Facebook is California, but Calibra, or the Libra Association, is Switzerland. For some reasons, the Swiss financial authority or government was very welcoming to set up a bank that might hold trillions of dollars. It's their thing, I guess. Facebook could potentially legally distance itself from the Libra Foundation, yet being one of the validator nodes, but not making these are very open questions which are unclear. And what if the US government says yes? We created a US company that will create a financial system which is bigger than any other country's financial system, going through borders without limits. Yes, but they always will be able to regulate Facebook. Well, in theory.
One thing, the majority of Facebook's, the overarching Facebook ecosystem users is outside the US, right? Straightforward. So if a bunch of US companies, or companies that kind of are under US regulation to some extent, build this vehicle in Switzerland and create a new currency, that's being adopted by 3 billion people in the world, mostly outside the US. That could you could reasonably argue that this could give the US tremendous power, right, over international monetary policy, right? And that is, to some extent, also really scary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, in my last answer, I forgot actually what I wanted to say, but I now got it again. Probably I need more beer. What I actually wanted to say was that we are now talking about like Facebook becoming too powerful and so on. Like they have to have the social network, they have so much data, they influence elections, and now they do financial stuff. From my point of view, we can't stop them from doing or becoming too mighty by just like stopping their currency project. I think the things that need to happen need to lie somewhere else. So my example is always, well, I worked in the bank before, and there is the PSD2. So kind of giving the people the ability to move data out of a bank account just to be able to move it to another bank, where I thought like, okay, an interesting idea to open bank accounts in that way, but what problem does it solve? So let's imagine we would have a PSD2 for Amazon, Facebook, and so on and so forth. If I would be able to move the data out, if this becomes public, if this becomes kind of, I don't know, I store it with my decentralized identity or something like that, and I decide where to move it. I think that's actually the way that needs to happen. And let's say, will it happen? Well, I don't know, but we have something like the PSD2, and that happened in the EU. And what I would hope to happen is something like that for data.
All right. So let me also take another question from the list from this app. And we have already a few votes for a question, which is what happens when bridges start to connect Libra to permissionless blockchains?
Do you all guys know what bridges are? Does anyone know what a bridge is? Okay, so, in blockchain, right, in blockchain space, bridges allow to bridge assets or information from one blockchain to the other, right? It kind of connects them in some way or another, right? Some in a trustless way, some in a federated way, some in a centralized way, right? I could be a centralized bridge. He's a blockchain, she's a blockchain, and I just, he gives me token, I issue tokens there and give it to another person, right? So I'm a bridge. So I think the question is now, like, what happens if, this kind of permissioned payment blockchain, or whatever, non-blockchain, whatever we call it, is being bridged to a permissionless blockchain. Let's take Ethereum as an example. So that would mean suddenly in Ethereum, an account can hold Libra tokens and transfer them. So first of all, I think it's unlikely that this will happen, because the regulator, I think, will step in before that and will say no to these members of the association. You don't do that, because you're a money transmitting business, and like whoever receives these tokens or transfers these tokens needs to be KYC'd. That's my best assumption, that it's unlikely that this will happen. If it happens, well, great. You have value added to other blockchain systems, because suddenly you can use the Libra asset, which might be valuable.
Yeah, I think the major challenge with that on the regulatory side, and well, I'm not a legal, so that's so it's just an assumption of mine, is that once we move out of like small amounts of money, because in the end, having a payment system is something comparable to something like e-money, if you want so, and this is something regulated and with some rules and laws and so on. And once you want to invest bigger amounts and you hold bigger amounts, you receive your salary with Libra or whatever, then I think it becomes really relevant on regulatory stuff. Because if you move small monies like below 50 euro, e-money is without KYC, and therefore we don't know.
Great. So we're running out of time. So I would say that's it. Thank you so much for this great discussion. So many open questions and unanswered questions yet, how it will pan out, but we shall see. So thanks so much for everyone for participating and asking great questions.
Thank you so much, dear panelists. That was great. Thank you so much for the amazing insight and all the panelists today, for great questions from the audience and from the internet. Please stay on stage for just a little bit. So as BerChain, we have regular events. We are open for everyone. Some are invite only, but do connect with us through social media. Join us on Slack, join us in events. Hope to see you again soon. I'd love to invite all the panelists and speakers today back on stage for whoever is still here. So please join us over here. And before you leave, I'd just like to refer back to the wise words of a man a long time ago, like the quote here, which is basically, Ich bin ein BerChainer. Thank you so much. Have a great evening. Thank you so much for joining.
Is it? Oh yeah, just like fun fact, for the last couple of hours, Facebook image sending system was down. So like, if anyone tried to send images on Facebook, Instagram, or WhatsApp, it was probably down. Just saying.
Please repost.
Because.
Can I have a photo with all the speakers that are still left, with all the panelists? And we have a few little gifts also for everyone here. Thank you. Thank you. G.